Forward rode Othrin, the earth resounded, till the house so high of hell he reached. Then Othrin rode to the eastern door. There, he knew well, was the wise woman's grave. Magic he spoke, and mighty charms, till spellbound she rose, and in death she spoke. What is the man, to me unknown, that has made me travel the troublous road? I was snowed on with snow, and smitten with rain, and drenched with dew. Long was I dead. The wise woman spake, home ride, Othrin, be ever proud, for none of men shall seek me more till Loki wanders, loose from his bonds, and to the last strife the destroyers come.
You're listening to the Steed of the Terrible One. What you just heard was an excerpt from Baldur's Traumar, or the Dreams of Baldur, where Odin brings a dead völva or seeress from the Hell, the realm of the dead, to ask her questions about the future of the gods. Just like with Odin, our goal is to bring a seeress back from the grave, the woman in grave 4 in Fyrkat. We won't speak magic or use charms and spells, but the powers of archaeology and imagination. Although we have almost succeeded in the preceding episodes, we have forgotten an object among the grave good. We must employ everything available to summon the sorceress of Fyrkat.
The light tone of a young woman singing lingers in the chilly air. After a moment, another voice joins her, and another one. They sing in the old language, the one used by storytellers and mages. Now comes the first beat of the drum. The singers are gathered in front of a high wooden throne, ornamented with beasts and gods from other worlds and times, painted with rich and dark colors. The drum beats fall seldom in a seemingly spontaneous rhythm. The crowd consists of tradesmen, smiths, and the king's people, but once again, mostly masons. Masons and masons' wives. The platform is mounted on a flat area just outside the fortress walls. This is where one of the huge fortress halls will be built. The völva is asking the gods for advice in this important project. The voices rise, the drum beats accelerate.
The craft of a Viking Age seeress, or a völva, was called seder. The word seder is, according to Neil Price, the author of a groundbreaking thesis on this phenomenon, impossible to render elegantly into English. One can, for example, make seder, raise seder, work seder. You can even say seder, making the noun into a verb. Basically, it describes the performance of Norse pre-Christian rituals. These rituals could include a great range of elements and of course varied over Scandinavia. They could include a form of meditation called sitting out. Here, wisdom was achieved through spending a long time in the wilderness, or under the bodies of hanged people. It could also include the handling of an empty door frame. Being lifted off this frame, one was assumed to see into the world of the dead. Remains of something like ritual masks, made of wolf or bear skin, and pictures of masked women have been analyzed. The masks might be connected to the practice of shape-shifting that is recurringly mentioned in the sagas. Narcotics seem to have been used in some cases, namely in Fyrkat. Charms made of animal limbs played a role in ritual practice and are also found in the grave in Fyrkat. The burials witness of strange ceremonial acts. A standing stone over which a dog has been squashed down and ripped apart, 2 horses bisected through the middle, and the halves of their bodies exchanged, a pit full of murdered children by the side of a military mass grave, etc. But moreover, if we are to believe the sagas, singing, sweet, enchanting singing to allure spirits. This practice is documented in the later saga literature. Such a thing is obviously hard to prove archaeologically, but remnants of what has been interpreted as drums can be seen as suggestions to the presence of music during the ritual. In some sagas, the great power of song could also be used as a deadly weapon, as in Laxdæla saga.
They went to Urut's dwelling and made great incarnations there. And when the spellworking began, those within were at a loss to make out what could be the reason of it. But sweet indeed was the singing they heard. Urut alone knew what these goings-on meant, and bade no man look out that night. And everyone who may keep awake, and no harm will come to us if that counsel is followed. Kari, who was then 12 winters old, he was the most promising of all Urut's sons, and Urut loved him much. Kari hardly slept at all, for to him the play was made. He did not sleep very soundly, and at last he got up and looked out, and walked in the direction of the enchantment, and fell down dead at once.
Still, the most central trait of the völva is neither of this. When the amateur archaeologist excavated the grave, all he found of the sorceress herself was a silhouette in the dirt. The grave goods were spread out around and over this figure. Under its feet he found what was to be documented as a metal rod. Staffs seem to have been the central equipment of sorcery for female ritual experts. Since the name for staff is something that could sound like völler in Old Norse, it has been suggested that what völva actually means is staff bearer. Scholars such as Leszek Gardela have also been able to categorize the staffs found in Viking graves in Scandinavia and form a sort of archetype for them. They often seem to be around 60 cm long, with an ornament of 4 stems in one end and a collection of metal amulets attached to the other end. The staff is also widely enough covered in later documents and in literature to prove that it must have been an ancient traditional use by that time. One example of this, that Neil Price lifts, is mentioned in the 12th century Christian Norwegian law that takes time to emphasize that no man shall have in his house staff or altar, device for sorcery or sacrificial offering, or whatever relates to the heathen practice. The sorcerer's staff is also mentioned in the Christian saga literature. In Laxdæla saga, it is part of a story that denounces the heathen traditions with a more respectful anxiousness. In this story, 2 women who have become Christian in older days pray regularly in a church in Helgafell. One night, Herdi, one of them, dreams of an angry crying woman who says that Herdi's friend is tossing and turning on top of her in the nights. Herdi decides to make someone dig the church floor where they used to pray, and
underneath they found bones, which were blue and ill-looking, together with a bush and a great Seidir staff. People then realized that a völva must have been buried there. The bones were moved to a remote place where people were least likely to pass by.
maybe it was just as important to bury the Fyrkat sorceress far from the fortress and to give her the honoring that she deserved to avoid her revenge. The metal rod in Grave 4 was badly fragmented, and there is still a discussion about whether it can be identified as a sorcerer's staff. Neil Price finds it legitimized, however, to analyze it as such because of the other parallels to other völva graves and their pattern of staffs.
The king and his men have joined the crowd. The sorceress is sitting in her throne, holding the drum. A wolfskin mask is glaring with its empty eyes at the spectators. Her staff rises as if to pierce the sky. It is on shining thick metal that parts into small stems, unifying again at the top. It creates something like a small cage. Her tapping on the drum with the lower end of the staff is gaining in intensity and tempo. A baby is crying in an excited crowd. Singing is louder now, and the cloud-covered sky appears to approach the people, as if the room between the ground and the sky is getting too small. The woman in the crowd holds tight to her baby. The Gandir are summoned, and the air is thick with spirits. The sorceress gives a sign with her arms, and everything goes quiet. Her chin is leaned upwards, as if the wolf mask was about to howl to an invisible moon in full daylight. And so, with a very soft and human voice, she starts talking. She foretells a fortunate future of the building project. She tells things of coming harvests, they will be better than last year's. But when she keeps on, and the king's name, the name Harald Bluetooth, is heard in the prophecy, instantly the court people start speaking loudly, and Prince Sven can't hear what she's saying. He only sees how his father rises and leaves the sight, while his men and priests are throwing bad names at the sorceress. She stays in the same position as if she doesn't notice them. The whole crowd stands as though spellbound until a prophecy is over.
In Old Norse literature, a staff in the hands of a sorceress could be used as a means of summoning spirits, or for accomplishing divination. It is also used for striking enemies, robbing them of memory and creating confusion. In some situations, the völva has phallic connotations, and ritual staffs seem to have been used in sexual ritual acts.
With taming wand I touch you, for I will make you tame, girl to my wishes.
This piece of malevolent Viking eroticism comes from the poem Skirnismal. In any case, the staff can be interpreted as a symbol of power. Just like the chair-formed amulets that we discussed in the last episode, it signals a connection to the divine, and therefore the ruling. We introduced this very episode with a quote from the poem Baldur's Dreams that demonstrates the völva's authority not only among kings, but in the face of the very god of knowing, Odin.
What is the man to me unknown that has made me travel the troublous road? I was snowed on with snow and smitten with rain, and drenched with dew, long was I dead. Odin spake, speak thou of hell, for of heaven I know. Wise woman, cease not, I seek from thee, all to know, that fain would ask, who shall the bane of Baldur become, and steal the life from Odin's son?
Odin, who had two black crows who circled the world telling him everything that happened at any moment, who gouged out his one eye to throw it into the well of wisdom, and who finally hanged himself and was resurrected to achieve even deeper wisdom. Even he, when he wanders, must turn into a völva. The staff in Fyrkat have been interpreted as many other things. Was it a roasting spit? Or was it even an instrument used in spinning thread? That the sorcerer's staffs found in many graves in Scandinavia resemble spinning spits is correct. It is far from unlikely that this connection was likewise made during the Viking Age. The truth is that exactly this type of typically female quotidian practices, like spinning, weaving and sewing, often got to carry magical connotations. The first example that comes to mind is of course the Norns, the Norse equivalent of the Fates in Greek mythology. Another example of this connection comes from Jomsvikinga saga. At one point in the saga we hear about a nightmare that the newly married Ingibjorg has in her new home on her wedding night.
I dreamed, she says, that I thought I was staying here on this estate, and I thought that the loom was set up and the cloth was grey of colour. It seemed as though the weights were attached to the cloth, and I was weaving. When one of the loom weights fell down behind from the middle of the cloth, I saw that the weights were men's heads. I picked up this head and I recognized it. Palnir asked whose head it was, and she said that it was the head of King Harald Gormson.
Here, the severed heads of men are used as weights on a loom for weaving. The head that falls belongs to a king. In the tale, this dream is said to predict the death of this king, Harald Gormson, which is actually the same man as the constructor of the Fyrkat fortress, Harald Bluetooth.
Sven Forkbeard, the prince, looks out from the eastern entrance of the fortress one last time. His eyes fix on the burning fires with the newly buried sorceress. It is in this moment that he remembers her first arrival over the waters. He remembers her practice and the conflict that arose between her and his father. To a newcomer, she represented the very roots of tradition, the roots that his father had tried to dig up and cut to make ready for a new sowing season. But by now, Sven knows what the seeress said about his father. He knew he didn't have many years left. He knew because the sorceress had given himself a certain place in her prophecies.
What can we know? Did the sorceress, like the dream of Ingbjörg, foresay the defeat of her king? Could she foretell that his reign would outlive her, but not last for longer than a few years after he had finished these impressive fortresses? And that the belief he was so proud to have instituted in Denmark wouldn't stay any longer? And in that case, did she inform Sven Forkbeard, his son, that he would be the one to cause his father's death and bring back the Odin cult to Denmark? We will never know any of these things. But what we know is what actually happened later. Sven Forkbeard would become one of the most ferocious enemies of the Christian world. After having put Denmark under himself, he would take both Norway and go on south to become the first Viking king of England in 1014 AD. But this story is a subject for a later season. Thank you for listening to the third episode in our first miniseries, The Sorcerer's Grave. We hope you look forward for diving deeper into these mysteries of magic and death together with us in coming episodes. All the while we keep to our constant objective, to bring the dead back to life.